toxic masculinity isn't just the extreme versions of it, like aggression, like male chauvinism, misogyny. Toxic masculinity also shows up in more subtle ways, like the inability to show emotions.
I would never get into fights because when I lost control, I go red. Like I lose control, and so I'm always controlling my emotions because of the fear of losing control.
The problem with shutting down your emotions or really limiting them is you're not just limiting the negative ones. You're numbing also the positive ones that help you really enjoy life even more.
Welcome to the Living Richly podcast. Eric and I are so grateful that you are joining us here today on this episode. We're so excited to be able to continue our conversation around mindful masculinity. Today, we're going to be looking at the Stoic archetype. I almost stumbled up on that, but we are going to be looking at. Almost got all emotional.
You're getting all emotional. You're not supposed to.
When we talk Stoic. We're going to be looking at the Stoic and what is that all about? And again, because we're talking mindful masculinity, we're going to be looking at both the things, the advantages to the Stoic archetype, as well as some of the disadvantages. But I want us to just take a few minutes and have that conversation again around why are we calling this mindful masculinity?
Well, it's I think when you do anything mindfully, you are present to what you're doing and you're choosing it deliberately as opposed to just being influenced unconsciously. And when we launched into this series of shows on being a real man, what does that mean in today's society? And again, we say that with humility. We don't claim to have all the answers about what that means. But we began to, in our research, realize that there are some real significant stereotypes or archetypes that have influenced the male psyche, how we show up in the world. Yeah. And those archetypes often contain great strengths. There's a reason they were embraced at some point throughout history to become what they are now, but they have a dark side and they keep men stuck. Yeah. And so this is really about creating a conversation, moving away from toxic masculinity to more mindful masculinity, to, again, looking at these archetypes, saying, how are they influencing the way I show up in the world? And is that the kind of man I want to be?
Right.
You get to choose. You don't have to just follow the crowd.
Yeah. And we want people to engage in a conversation around this.
Exactly.
And one of the things that we have found is, and oftentimes when we get talking about masculinity today, people often go to toxic.
Right.
And so now there's this, for a lot of men, their backs get up and they get very defensive around, we're changing what it means to be a man. We're dismissing the real man and we have to, all of this kind of stuff. And what we're saying is, no, let's have a conversation so that we can be mindful.
Yeah.
Recognizing how we're showing up. And what I love about the approach we're taking is just what you've already just said is that we are recognizing the value of each. There's a reason why these stereotypes exist.
Right.
And there's so much good in them. There's also so much that we need to be mindful about them. And that's really what this conversation is about. So we're talking today, Stoic, which last episode, and we want to encourage people to go back and look, there's been a couple of episodes. The first episode we did in this series was just unpacking what we're going to be talking about. So important. And I encourage people to take some time to listen to that episode. And now we've talked already about the lone wolf or the lonely wolf. Yeah. And I appreciate so much how vulnerable you were on that one. That's a stereotype that you certainly connect to and can relate to, both the positives and the challenges, the things.
I know the dark side.
The dark side of it. This is one that I can now kind of probably tie into and be a bit more familiar with. As we talk about the Stoic archetype, talk to me a little bit, just at a high level, what are we talking about when we talk about the Stoic?
Yeah, I think when we talk about the Stoic, I mean, literally, it came around as a sort of a philosophy. It sort of emerged in like 300 BC, I think it was, back in Greece. A fellow by the name of Xenocidius, it was the guy, or Citium, I should say, was the guy who's credited with its origins, but really made famous, the Stoic philosophy really made famous by guys like the likes of Marcus Aurelius, who you'll often see him quoted.
Can I just jump in just before you go in and explain it?
Yeah.
Can we start a movement to bring back some of those wonderful Greek names? we need some babies born.
Zeno of Zydium.
Exactly.
Like nobody would have.
Come on.
Yeah, those are some great names. Really great names. But it emerged as a philosophy, a really powerful philosophy, actually, very, very useful, about mastering your emotions through self-control and toughness, if I can just really use it layman's terms, to shake off sort of bad vibes and destructive feelings. It really was about understanding that emotions left unchecked can go from a nice fire in the fireplace, keeping the place warm and lighting up the room, to burning the whole fucking room down. So it emerged as a response to that, to say that leaning more into logic, leaning more into understanding what you can and can't control. They were also actually famous for being lovers of nature. That was a big part of it, right? And we certainly are that. And again, managing and mastering some of those darker emotions that often get us into trouble.
Yeah.
But I think over time, what ended up happening is it's become this, and I want to make clear that when we talk about the Stoic today, we're not talking necessarily about that original philosophy, which again, I think holds tremendous value for anyone to examine. A lot of great truths found there. But what we're holding up today to challenge is the Stoic mindset in terms of the archetype or stereotype that leaves men feeling stuck emotionally. Like, I would almost say this is about how to be Stoic without getting stuck. If I
love that.
Play on that phrase, right? So how to lean into emotional mastery for sure. What I can control, can't control, absolutely. Love of nature, 100%. How to master difficult emotions, you got me, right? Yeah. But for some men, that has led to really an emotional straitjacket where they are incapable, unable, or just been conditioned not to get in touch with their emotions.
And I relate to this. I talk about, I've got a redheaded temper, but it's very
our audience wants to know something. I've gotten several emails, texts, and whatever since the show started.
Yes.
They said, Rob is a redhead.
Yes.
Does he have a soul?
No. No
soul here.
No, absolutely. Redheads don't have a soul. Yeah,
I'm glad we cleared that up.
One of the people will say, you've got such a long fuse, and I do, nothing gets to you until it does. And I am very much, I see that when I go, you feel it building up, you keep it control, but when it comes out, it's so irrational, right. The anger. And again, I can say, most people that are close in my life in many cases, I've got people that'll be known me for, 15 years. And they're like, I don't know if I've ever seen you really get angry.
Yeah.
Cause it's very rare when it happens. And the way I used to describe it, even in my late teens, when I used to was running on the streets and doing a bunch of stupid shit, is I would never get into fights, because when I lost control, I go red. I lose control. And so I'm always controlling my emotions because of the fear of losing control. And we're going to get into more about that stuff. But that's the Stoic, is the one who feels the need to always be in control of that.
Until you're not, right? Now, I was raised in a French-Canadian home, very emotional.
I've never noticed you speaking,
God,
exactly. Every French word. Every French word.
Listen, I will say this about the French. We can swear far better than the English, right?
Yes.
And I'm sorry if you don't agree with me, but in French, it's about how many swear words you can string together in a row.
It's poetry.
It's poetry in motion.
Yeah.
It's vile and it's profanity, but it's profanity in motion.
And it's always based on the church.
It's always based on the church. Absolutely. We're not here to talk about that, but we're off topic. We're off topic.
Yeah.
But it's true. But I was raised in a home where I remember having friends over, that were not raised in a French Canadian home, and they used to sit at the dinner table and be a little bit shell shocked by the volume and the how animated we were. And so for me, being comfortable expressing emotion, I would say, has been part of my journey the whole way. The problem is there was an there was a great comfort with emotion, not a great understanding of how to control or master more negative emotions. And so I grew up with a really serious temper, real anger issue right into my late 20s, right? Where stuff, even though I was comfortable expressing emotion, there's a lot that I wouldn't, and I would bottle up, especially when it was darker stuff or more painful stuff. I was falling prey still in that moment to the Stoic mindset that you can't, or to just the condition, forget Stoic for a second, just the conditioning that most men have been taught that you can't let them see you cry, that if you get hurt, just rub some dirt on it. Don't be a sissy. We've talked about this. Don't be a pussy. Don't show that emotion. And what we end up doing is bottling it up inside until it gets the better of us, right?
Until it gets uncorked.
And if I could come back, you said something in your introduction I think is worthy of coming back to for just a moment before we dive in, because we want to look at the upsides of the Stoic mindset or archetype and things that I think men could benefit from really channeling and leaning into. And then we're going to examine the dark side of it. But you talked about how we start talking about being a real man in today's culture and people get their back up, especially men tend to get their back up, especially when we use the terminology toxic masculinity. I would remind our listeners, especially the men that are listening, toxic masculinity isn't just the extreme versions of it, like aggression, like male chauvinism, misogyny. Put all the darker stuff in there. Of course, those are all expressions of toxic masculinity, but toxic masculinity also shows up in more subtle ways, like the inability to show emotion, like the lonely wolf that we talked about, and the inability to ask for help or admit that you're struggling. These are toxic behaviors that really get us into trouble. And I have discovered in my life, when someone says something or I hear or am exposed to something and I get angry or resistant, I really need to examine that as opposed to run away from it. Why? Because something that is core to me is being rattled and shaken, and perhaps I need to examine it more closely. Yep. So if you're listening to the show today and there's stuff that you don't agree with, good. If it makes you upset, good. Just don't dismiss it out of hand. Make sure you give it a chance.
And I'll go a bit further on that. And I would say to those that are listening that do right away get their back up, let me speak your language. What are you afraid of? Right? Stop. Don't be chicken. Right?
Time to human up, right?
Like human up and take a look and see if some of these behaviors or these characteristics are true. If they're not, good. Yeah. You're golden.
But at least you've been mindful.
But at least you've been mindful enough to say, hey, am I someone who struggles with some of these? And then let's just look at where does that take you on the journey as you start to explore. And that's really what we're trying to do here. So let's talk about some of the benefits of the Stoic. Yep. Why is it? Because if there were no benefits, it wouldn't exist.
It wouldn't have taken root.
It wouldn't have taken root. So what are some of the benefits? Maybe let's start with what would be the first one that comes to mind?
Definitely the first one for me is resilience, right? The ability to weather the storm, because Stoicism isn't just about keeping a stiff upper lip. It's really about remaining cool under pressure. And listen, I'm sure you've been in situations where you have appreciated. So I admire that about you for sure. You seem always cool under pressure, right? And no doubt people appreciate that about you. But when something's going down that's like a crisis or whatever, you want someone who's calm, cool, and collected. So the ability in that moment not to get overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment, to distance yourself from those emotions and to look at it more objectively and more logically and to think about what's the better way forward here. Listen, that is going to give you tremendous resilience. I have been carried along by the waves of negative emotion. Yeah. And when that's happening, you're not thinking straight. You're not at your best. You are emotionally and mentally compromised.
If I'm sitting in a room and there's a bomb in the room and I can't get out, and the bomb disposal unit, they come in, the first question I'm asking,
and they're freaking out.
Oh my God. Right? No.
Can you imagine? They need to do a comedy movie where that's what happens. The bomb disposal guy comes into the room.
Oh, shit. Oh, you're in trouble.
We're fucked, people.
right? You want that. That's the first question I'm asking him is, do you have control of your emotions?
Right.
You're absolutely right. There are situations and circumstances where you absolutely are looking for that. You want the leader who says, everyone follow me. We're going to get through this.
Right.
There's so many situations when you're in the crisis, in the moment. I remember I was working with, this was a long time ago. We were working with there was an expo that was happening, a health expo, and we had a guest speaker from the States, and he was up, and I was the person who was running it. I was helping them out, and my job was to just kind of be their assistant, be the support guy for this guest speaker, going into all the media, doing news report or doing interviews and taking them around, everything like this. And at one point, he said to me, I've never had anyone working with me who stays focused and calm no matter whatever happens. And he tried to convince me to go and work for him full time.
Right.
You were trying to convince me to come and coach with you, so I picked you.
I made the better offer. Well, maybe not the better offer, but here we are. All these years later.
But so I can relate to that. Is the calmness to be able to kind of. And I'm going into the next benefit. In that calmness, the Stoic has the ability to stay focused.
100%.
And I think that's the second. If resilience is the first positive attribute or characteristic, the second one is the focus. You're not caught up in what is happening. You're able to almost get the clear focus and vision in the midst of chaos.
Right. You're able to keep your eye on the prize, right?
Where it needs to go.
You're not as easily rattled. And so rather than getting distracted by a million different things, that ability again and it's not about turning off your emotions. And I think this is where Stoicism is misunderstood. It was mastering the more negative versions of it. I love in our notes here, you put this great quote from Marcus Aurelius, who is, again, the Stoic philosopher is probably the most well-known, even though he's not the originator of it all. He says, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. And how many times have we talked about you are not your thoughts, you are the one who thinks your thoughts, you are not your feelings, you're the one who experiences them. And when we're able to appreciate all those things but detach ourselves from them slightly, even just a little bit, we gain perspective. And so focus definitely comes. And with that focus then, another great upside of the Stoic mindset is the ability to remain clear in your thinking and make better decisions, right? Let's face it, when you focus on logic over extreme emotion, you're going to find it easier to make better decisions. I know I have said things and done things in the heat of the moment when I'm all worked up that I can't point. There's not a lot that I could point to that says that in those moments I look back and said, that was the right thing to say and the right way forward. Usually you look and you go, what the fuck was I thinking? Why did I say that? I'm usually having to go back and do some repair work as opposed to advance.
Now, where I'll maybe challenge that one a little bit, because I agree, it is historically, it has been one of the characteristics that supports or really celebrates the Stoic. The more we understand the way the brain works, the way we understand, we've learning a lot about how you've got as many decision making. Why am I blanking on the word there? But decision making capabilities in your gut,
right,
as you do in your brain, right? And so this notion of follow your
even in your heart is considered another source. Right.
So following your gut, when we talk about this, the Stoic would say, you don't follow your gut.
Right.
You don't follow your gut instincts. You follow the logic.
Yeah.
And what I would say is the more and more we're leaning into this, sometimes when the emotion says, run, run, right?
That might be the best thing to do.
So I think there in most situations, the Stoic has the ability to make better decisions. Sometimes the decision needs to embrace the emotion
100%
in that moment, right?
But that's where rather than cutting emotion off, you're using emotion to inform your decision. But I think this is where, again, whether men have embraced I don't think there'd be a lot of men that have embraced a Stoic philosophy. I've run into some people that definitely would say that.
Right.
I think most men are just influenced by that sort of emotional cutoff. The only emotion they really know is rage and anger. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Why is it that that's so? Why is that the case? But I love this notion of, again, it's not either or here.
No.
Right? I think a more balanced, a more healthy, a healthier approach to it all is in the words of Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great. He said that effective leaders learn to embrace the genius of the both and, as opposed to the tyranny of the either or. So it's not logic or emotion. What if you embraced logic and emotion? I think you'd be far better off.
I love that. And another characteristic I think that is that really celebrates the Stoic is reliability. Yeah. The Stoic is someone who, again, because they don't often get shifted. The emotion isn't pulling them. They're able to stay committed. They're able to stay, again, because of focus, they're able to stand by what they say, regardless of how the sands are shifting, regardless of what's going on. You certainly will see people and we talk about it today. And this is why people kind of push back on the language of toxic masculinity, is because you do see today where there's so much that, suddenly because of mental health issues and everything else, I can't do that today, or I can't do this. And often you'll hear people say we can't depend on people anymore because they're not able to, they don't have that Stoic ability to just say, I'm pushing forward no matter what the situation.
Yeah, and I think, the last upside that we'll explore today, and this certainly hasn't been an exhaustive list.
No,
we're just kind of covering some of the high. You think of all the things we've mentioned, right? Resilience, focus, clarity and decision making, reliability. These are all phenomenal leadership traits, right? So if you're a leader, you're a male leader listening to this, these are all phenomenal things to channel in your leadership. What we're trying to say is it's not enough, right? We're going to talk about in a few minutes how Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence model would challenge, again, not say that these things are bad, not at all, but emotional intelligence would say there's more to the picture than perhaps that Stoic philosophy or mindset or archetype would lead us to believe, right? Let's talk about some of the downsides now, right? I think the biggest one, and we hear this often from significant others, right, that talk about their male partner and say he's just not emotionally available. He's disconnected. That Stoic archetype, that inability to get in touch with your feelings and express emotion appropriately. And by appropriately, I don't mean you're going to get it right all the time, but the ability to tap into your emotions. To me, it's like the difference between living in black and white. I think you used this on a recent show. Right. Living in black and white. We're both old enough to remember black and white television, right? Well, at least I've heard stories about black and white.
Oh, give me a break.
Right?
Man.
It's difference, but back in my day. But it's the difference between living in black and white and living in color, right? Like when you're not able to tap into those emotions, you're missing out. It's like part of your gear is not functioning, right?
Yeah.
You've shut it off. You've just not learned how to channel it, how to access it. And this can lead to a real problem in relationships, either platonic relationships, friendships, but where it really shows up is in relationships with significant others, relationships with our kids and the rest of it.
There it is. And not only so we for a lot of men, there's a struggle to be able to express those emotions. And a lot of that, we'll get into it even with, because we only know one emotion, we don't know the language to use. It was interesting. I was working with I coach a number of different teams, and I'm coaching one of the teams that I'm working with. It's a leadership team for a large landscaping company. And I'm meeting with them and I'm working with them. And one of the guys actually brought up very much this was he's trying to become more outgoing with his emotions. And he reckoned even his wife was like, you really do struggle with this. And he shared an emotion. And I said, is that really the emotion? Let me take you through a little exercise. And I used the feelings wheel,
great
right?
Tool.
Which we've talked about on the show before. We'll put it in the show notes. I talked about the feeling wheel and I took him through to what he was truly feeling. And it was just wonderful to watch this guy. He's in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. For the first time, be able to follow the dots, to connect the dots, to go, that's what I'm feeling.
Right.
And now he could, because he could name it, he was able to then express it. We used name it, tame it, but even just to express it. And I think there's that challenge to do that. We see it. One of the great examples that I see it in is certainly people coming back from, whether it's veterans coming back from war, people that have gone through incredibly traumatic, those traumatic events. They just, in those moments, because in the positive side of the Stoic, they've had to keep their emotions in check to do the job. When they're off the job, they don't know what to do with it.
Well, let's remind our audience, listeners. I want to remind you, the word emotion contains the word motion. I remember it was Susan Blaine when she was on the show last year, right, with the Dare to Be Vulnerable movement. We're great big fans of hers. She made that statement, and it stuck with me. Emotions are meant to move through us, but for Stoics or people stuck in the Stoic archetype, I would say emotions get stuck. They don't get to move through, and this leads to a second downside of that archetype of keeping your emotions always under control, is that their emotional bottling is at risk here. You're at risk of kind of because you keep them under wraps so much, you never learn to really appreciate their value. And just because you don't express an emotion doesn't mean it goes away. If it doesn't move through you, it stays stuck in you. And usually what ends up happening, it can lead to all kinds of negative physical and even mental health issues because it's not meant to stay there. So the ability to express it is not just a good thing that you might benefit from. It's actually it's critical to your physical and mental health.
I so completely agree, and I, of course I agree, because that's what all the research shows us. One of the things that for me, oftentimes, because it's motion, emotion is motion. Yes, sometimes we can bottle it up and we contain it. For me, though, what would often happen is that sucker's got to move,
right,
and so it gets expressed in a different way. And so much of my destructive tendencies, until I learned to start to express my emotions in a healthy, productive way, so much of my destructive behaviors was I'm feeling stress. Let's say, use that. I'm feeling anxious. And so I would do something that was completely unhealthy or not beneficial to me, but it was a way of getting that motion out. In a completely different, and what I would see as a safe way, not safe, but if that makes sense.
Totally. I think that the point you're making, and I want to really drive it home, is that whether you express emotion or not, you're going to express emotion.
Exactly.
That emotion is going to find a way out, and that's either going to come out in a way that's healthy and vibrant and helps you enjoy, let it move through you, or it's going to come out sideways. And again, for most men, when it comes out sideways, it often comes out as anger or rage. That filter, for some reason, for men, that's a big thing.
And it's and one of the resulting things of that, of course, is the strained relationships. Right,
100%.
All of a sudden we see this. The Stoic almost in some ways becomes the lone wolf, but not in the healthy way. Becomes a lonely wolf, I should say, only because there becomes distance. You have worked with all kinds of young people in different relations, different environments and our backgrounds, and so many times kids would express to me, my dad doesn't love me, my dad doesn't care about me, and of course he loves you, of course he cares about you. He does not express it.
Right.
So there's this distance, and we suddenly see generations of kids that are completely disconnected to parents. So many of us who grew up with Stoic, not in my case, but many people that have grown up with Stoic dads, suddenly they've always struggled to find to get accepted by their dad because that relationship is so strained. So many relationships, marriages,
and to your
that
point,
fall apart.
It wasn't because there wasn't love present.
Absolutely,
it's because there was an inability to express it. And I think significant others would say, that they're perhaps not receiving the emotional support that they need. They feel that their partner feels distant and perhaps a bit aloof and not really connected because they're not able to get in touch with their heart. And remember, when we talk about living richly, one of the ways we define that is having full access to all of the resources of the mind, the heart, the spirit, and the body, right? Like using all the gear the universe has given us to truly live up to our full potential. And I think for a lot of men, other than passion and which is fire, and anger, which is real fire as well, they struggle with any other kind of emotional range, and that can lead to some real problems.
So let's talk more about Daniel Goleman and emotional intelligence. And what does emotional intelligence say to what would if Daniel Goleman was on the show? Hey, Daniel Goleman, we'd love to have you on the show. Is Daniel Goleman? I shouldn't be asked this live here, but is he alive?
Daniel Goleman, I think so.
I think so. Daniel, if you are, reach out to us because
we'd love to have you on the show. If not, our deepest condolences. Wow, he'll never come on the show now. You just really fucked that up.
If Daniel Goleman,
so Harper, hey Steve, are you here? He's here. Steve is just shaking his head like this.
He's like, oh. Okay. Anyway, if Daniel, what would emotional intelligence say to the Stoic?
Well, it's interesting because, again, there's so many great qualities, as we've said, from resilience to focus to clear decision making and the rest of it. But I think Daniel Goleman's model would say it's not enough. It's not complete. And I love the ancient Buddhist story of the three blind monks that are asked to describe an elephant. And I think one of them is hugging like the elephant's leg. One is holding the trunk in his arms, and the third monk is holding the tusks. Right, and they're each asked to describe what they're experiencing and what they're feeling, because of course they can't see. And all three monks describe and report accurately what they're feeling and experiencing. And so, in essence, their description of the elephant is accurate, but it's not complete. It's not complete. So I think Daniel Goleman's model would inform, not necessarily, it would challenge it in some ways that it's gone too far. A lot of the Stoic mindset has gone too far. Again, we're not encouraging folks to abandon it. As a matter of fact, I think there's a lot of men that could benefit. I kind of wish that I would have been exposed to some Stoic thinking earlier on in my life, and it might have helped temper some of the extreme emotion that I was feeling. I might have learned some skills earlier in life to manage that a little bit more. But we want to avoid becoming the Spocks of the world, right? That are living without emotion. Because if you're a Star Trek fan, by the way, if you follow Spock's evolution throughout the movies, young Spock to old Spock has become very comfortable with emotion, and much more comfortable with emotion, has understood that his human side is as much value as his Vulcan side. Now, I just geeked out there for a second.
Sure, yeah.
But Goleman would say there's more to the story, and that emotional intelligence is about learning to use your emotions, getting in touch with them and using them effectively. And there's all kinds of research that would show us that the male leader who embraces emotional intelligence will not only help avoid a lot of the physical repercussions like blood pressure issues, cardiovascular disease. There's all kinds of research that shows the inability to tap into your emotion leads to that. Mental health issues, we're going to put some stuff in the show notes. Research and studies that have shown how damaging it is to men, and this isn't limited to men. Let's face it, there's a lot of women that are our female listeners are going to be listening to this and are going to be able to relate to this whole shutdown of emotions thing too. But it's Stoicism would teach men to be unflappable, to control their emotions, and remain calm under pressure. It's really about maintaining a stiff upper lip, no matter what. And I think Daniel Goleman's model would try to flip the script a little bit.
I love when you watch movies today, and with a lot of the action heroes and characters, how you see even the storylines of many of these of the kind of the hero are embracing a lot of that emotional intelligence, right? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the action hero never cries, never is bothered, right? Only shows anger in conflict, is so calm, and whereas today there's so many movies where you watch that and you see some of these strong, tough characters, their scenes where they are showing that emotion, they're weeping,
that vulnerability,
the embracing. I really do appreciate the fact that society is starting to get the idea that this didn't work.
Right. It's not working.
It's actually, this isn't complete.
Right.
is probably the better language of what we're trying to say, is that there was another side of this that needs to be in order to be full.
100%. 100%. Like Stoicism focuses on, again, that control and suppression, where emotional intelligence would push for emotional awareness and expression, right? It invites men to break out of the emotional straitjacket that they've been in and learn to be more comfortable showing empathy, showing vulnerability. And I know we had one of our viewers, we've talked about him on the show before, and we are grateful that he joined the conversation, even watched the episode, because he's a very different viewpoint. I think one of his statements was that vulnerability is for women, and again, we disagree with that. Probably, we disagree with that. I know very strongly. I think vulnerability is a superpower, whether you're male or female. But that is an expression. His view that never let them see you sweat, don't let them see you cry, don't show weakness, man up, don't be a pussy. All of it falls into that category. Whereas again, what we're encouraging is channel your Stoic when it makes sense to channel your Stoic, but don't be a one-trick pony. No different than when we said, hey, there's times where you're going to need to channel your lone wolf. Because if all you do is live your life to follow the crowd, you'll never do anything on purpose that's fulfilling. You got to follow your heart, and at times that means striking out on your own. It's no different. There are times here where the Stoic approach is the right approach for the moment, but what if you completed the picture and you expanded your range and added the ability to inform your decision making and connect better with your team and connect better with your spouse and connect better with your kids, because you are learning to express emotion more appropriately, more regularly, other than just passion or rage.
So we're going to talk about passion and rage. We're going to talk about those emotions in a moment, but before I do, I'm going to go completely off script, and I know that we've got these notes, but what would you say? Because often, I know this was true for me, and having to learn this. What would you say to the person that says, Eric, I get it. I get it. I need to, I'm a Stoic. I need to express this emotion. I need to be more comfortable, or I need to be able to do this, but I'm just uncomfortable. I don't know how to be around emotional people, or I get really uncomfortable when people start to express emotion. I think of the person, and this is oftentimes, right, if you're sitting with someone who is sad, is kind of gone through something, and they're crying, the Stoics' response is to maybe is smart enough to say, I need to hold them, but then it's okay, don't cry, right? We right away try to stop emotioning.
We do it.
Right?
We do it. Listen, my dad did it to me, and I did it to my kids.
Right.
Because I didn't understand this stuff back then.
So what would you say to someone who just says, I don't understand, I'm uncomfortable around emotion. How do I get comfortable being around emotion?
Get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Because the reality is,
I hoped you'd say,
if this is something you've not been open to or you've not explored, it's like anything new in your life, right? You step into an arena where you don't have the training or the experience, your immediate feeling is one of incompetence. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to respond to this. And although that's uncomfortable, it's a necessary part of learning and transformation, right? It's Stephen Covey's steps of learning: unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence, right? But it starts with realizing, I don't know what I'm doing here. This is all new to me. So of course it's going to make me feel uncomfortable. But I would say to you, what do you have to be afraid of? Like, how many times have you been in a situation where you were learning something new? You were uncomfortable at first, but in time you learned it and you became more confident, more competent over time. This isn't going to happen overnight, but through training and through giving yourself permission to complete perhaps the equation in your life, you're going to open up an entire arena, right? Like, the problem with shutting down your emotions or really limiting them is you're not just limiting the negative ones. You're numbing also the positive ones that help you really enjoy life even more. So again, you're sort of like partially numb. And if you're tired of being numb and you want to be alive, open up to this area and start exploring. And we're going to talk about strategies that you can use to do just that.
Just before we jump in and talk about the strategies, then let's spend a minute or two. We've got about 5 minutes left, 6 minutes left before we want to really land the plane here. But so just a minute or two.
Time has gone by fast.
I know it is
today.
About why are men so angry? Why are we so conditioned? Why are we so conditioned that is a normal, expected response? When men get angry, we just go, well, that's what men do.
Well, listen, I think a big part of it has been social conditioning. It's been how we've been raised, how we've been nurtured. Emotions like sadness or fear are considered weak. And we're told from the time like we're little, right up into adulthood, toughen up. You're better than this. But, you're stronger than this. And so any emotion that, again, it would be labeled as weakness is avoided. And yet aggression and anger is almost encouraged because that's taking control. That's a man being a man, is asserting himself in this world. So I think the social conditioning is a big part of it.
I think so. And I think it becomes an armor that we put on, right? It's our protection because we think that when I'm angry, I'm in control, I'm in control of the situation because I'm being domineering with this. When in reality, we're often out of control when we're angry, we're not responding the way we should. But that's certainly often the protection piece is a big element.
Well, and I would say the protection, the armor becomes your prison in most cases, right? I think there's also this role expectation, right? This old school idea that, to be manly, you have to be stoic and in charge. I think it's, again, programming that's been around for a very, very long time. And I would say that really when we think about the anger and the rage, anger is not bad. I mean, I remember my coach, Sherry, telling me that I had a very complicated relationship with anger because I had in my earlier years, that anger was not good. I would lose my cool. I would yell. There's times that even when my kids were younger, I was never abusive. But I have a big voice. And so if I raise my voice, I could be very intimidating. And that was not my intention, but because I wasn't managing emotion properly, there were moments where I even made my kids feel very uncomfortable, scared, and they remember that. We still talk about it sometimes, right? And I regret those moments, but it's because I didn't have the ability to express other emotions properly. That was the only way it would come out. And anger itself is not a bad emotion. Anger can be very powerful fuel when it's properly channeled. I think it gets polluted because there's no other filter. And so all the emotions that you're feeling get channeled as anger. And then all of a sudden it becomes this burning fire that can burn the whole house down, right?
All right. I'm ready to embrace emotion. I'm ready to be uncomfortable. I want to figure out the positive sides of emotional intelligence. I want to be fully present to my emotions and all of that. What are some practical steps that we can take? And let me start with just the one that we really introduced at the beginning here, and that's embracing mindfulness. I would say the starting point, at least for me, in really coming into this was recognizing and understanding what was going through my head in these different situations, being able to explore why is it not, so to now I'm the guy that I sit and I'll cry watching a commercial, and I'm comfortable with that now where I wasn't for the longest time. Right. Part of it's age, but it's, I was saying it before you said it. I know you were thinking it. But I would say embrace the, and really just embrace mindfulness around this is the starting point to really making that shift.
100%.
What else?
Well, I mean, and a little bit more on mindfulness, like, again, like getting present to what's going on under the hood, like some kind of reflective practice where, to your point, you process what's happening to you in life, especially the harder things in life that tend to lead to more negative emotions. You can't just bottle that shit up. Like, emotions are like, think of traffic, right, on a highway. Well, when all the cars are moving smoothly, you you can travel great distances in great time, and it's all working as intended, right? But when there's a traffic jam, when things get all bunched up, right now, and you're in like parking lot type traffic, well, now all it builds up is frustration and anger and like road rage and whatever else. Well, that's what happens when emotions get bunched up, when they get all caught up with each other, is you experience this internal traffic jam. So mindfulness helps you untangle that mess and get the traffic moving again, right? Another one is, I think both men and women could benefit from increasing their emotional literacy. I call it their emotional acuity. We don't have the language, right? You ask most people, how are you feeling? Bad. Good, sad, sad, usually glad. They say good or bad. I'm like, well, what does good mean? What does bad mean? And perhaps they can go as far, okay, like let's talk about some of the basic emotions. Bad, mad, or sorry, bad's not one. Bad's not an emotion. No. Mad, glad, and sad at least are emotions. Yeah. But even that doesn't really give you a sense of what you're really experiencing. Yeah. So a tool like the feelings wheel, that's been a powerful tool for me. I've used it with so many of my clients where they go from saying, no, I'm mad, to saying, no, I felt disrespected. Yeah. Well, all of a sudden, that's a very different expression of what you're experiencing. And now you can unpack that. You can perhaps connect some dots that you couldn't before. So increasing your emotional literacy by increasing your language, your ability to name the feeling and then tame it.
And I love the example that you gave in our notes around the idea of the crayons in a coloring box, right? The bigger the box, the more the colors. Now, again, I'm the kind of guy, hey, what color is that? Blue. Right,
but there's shades of blue.
There's shades of right. There's
like indigo is different than navy.
Is it navy blue? Is it baby blue? Is it right? A royal blue? Like there's and to be able, the more you get into, the more specific you can get, and this is where we use this language around emotions. Name it to tame it. Now, not tame it as in to not allow it to happen, but tame it so that it's not controlling you, but you're controlling that emotion, that you are recognizing 100%. When that emotion is good and when it's not. Yeah. I do think journaling and some kind of reflection exercise. I often talk about this when I'm helping clients around productive conflict. It's recognizing there are triggering moments, and often in the moment or early on when you're starting this work, you're going to react the way you react. Yeah. Now afterwards, look and go, okay, how did I react? Was that the best? What were some other ways I could have reacted? What was the scripts going through my mind at that moment? There's some really good questions you can ask yourself in that reflective time, so that the next time it happens, you're that much more equipped. And then the next time it happens, you're more equipped.
100%. And there was a great study out of Cambridge University that actually showed that journaling, especially about negative experiences in life, has a direct correlation to improved mental health and even physical health. I mean, it's a great study. We'll put it in the show notes. Another one is seeking therapy or coaching. I know we talk openly about, we have a coach who's actually a therapist. We meet with her, well, not together, but we see her usually about monthly.
We probably need couples counseling.
Do we need couples counseling at this point? We'll get Steve to help us.
Yes, Steve.
Steve! Hey, but therapy and coaching can be a great way to have a person who's not involved in the weeds of your life help you process and talk through. If journaling doesn't seem to be comfortable for you, a lot of guys struggle with that. I'm not quite sure why. I think it's perhaps
the Dear Diary.
It's the Dear Diary thing. I think that's the correlation they make. But to me, journaling is really a powerful exercise. And I'm like, again, what are you afraid of? You might actually really benefit from not keeping a daily diary, but when you're struggling with something, rather than bottle it up, try to just write about it. Even if you just write about the negative feelings you're experiencing, you're going to feel some release. That helps with that motion that we were talking about earlier. But therapy and coaching can be another great place to talk it out with a non-judgmental person who creates a safe and sacred space for you just to show up as you are, and not to try to fix you necessarily, but at least hear you out and give you some other perspectives to, again, complete the incomplete picture you may have about it.
Yeah,
right?
And we've said it, and I believe it. I'm not going to go so far as to say you can't do this work on your own.
And yet we will say this. You can't do this work on your own.
It's fucking hard to do it on your own, that you need that outside source who can see and look at this objectively, because when we're in it, it's just so hard to do that. And that goes to the last kind of suggestion I would make, and that is find those people that you can use as examples, that
100%.
You can learn from. And again, this is what I do appreciate, that in society today, we seem to be creating and highlighting more leaders who are strong, stoic type people who are also embracing the emotion, and you see that. And I so appreciate people like, I've read Arnold Schwarzenegger's book. I follow his podcast. You see other guys like that are those stronger people. There's a bunch of documentaries, Sylvester Stallone. You got a number of them out there now that the men would see as men's men, who you see this side of embracing that vulnerability is
at least they're beginning to open the door.
They're opening
right?
the door to it, yeah.
100%. So I think that's really what it comes down to, is seeking those people who model a broader range of emotion. I'm not suggesting, there are some folks that are emotionally, I will use the word unstable. And by that, I mean, their emotions just get the better of them, and they don't have really any mastery over them. And so they're like waves in an ocean, man. They're up, they're down. It's a pretty turbulent ride. That's not what we're suggesting here. But folks that are, find some people in your circle that are more comfortable expressing appropriate emotion, and observe. Get around that stuff, and you'll become less uncomfortable with it, and it may help you expand your range.
All right, last question for you. Last thought around this. What would you, what kind of final thoughts? What would you say to someone who's listened to this, is kind of stuck around right to the end? They're ready to do some of this stuff. What piece of advice would you give that individual today?
If you're here watching the show or listening to the show right now on all the different platforms that we're on, and you can really relate to being that stoic individual that has perhaps gotten stuck emotionally, I would say just take some steps. Like, stop being afraid. There's so many things. Fear will keep you bound, will keep you in the same situation that you're in now. Things will not get better. Fear typically doesn't lead long-term fear. Fear may be that, even fear is an emotion, so there's nothing wrong with fear. But as we get comfortable with that one too, but as we learn to channel it, let it inform our decisions. Well, if you're feeling fear, if you're feeling that your cage got rattled by listening to the show today, then there's perhaps something that you've been missing. Complete the picture. Don't miss out on the color of life. Don't limit yourself to black and white. There is so much more that you could experience if you'll just give yourself permission to start.
So good. I so appreciate these conversations, and we're going to continue them. I'm real excited with where we're going to be going next. We're going to hopefully be talking in our next focus on mindful masculinity around shame.
Yeah, we're going to have Kelly Flanagan.
That's the plan, is that we're going to have Kelly Flanagan on again to come back and to talk to us about that. I do want to just thank everyone who has been listening, who's followed along. Want to encourage you to subscribe to the podcast. If you're thinking of some people in your life that you feel would really benefit from an episode like this one, why don't you share it out to them and just put a little personal note in there and let them know that you'd love for them to listen, to watch it, and then maybe even share their thoughts. We are so friggin' excited about the Life Vision Challenge. We're talking about it. It's all over our social medias. We want to encourage you. What a great way to start to figure out who you are and what truly matters to you, so you can become the kind of man that you want to be, or the women that you want to be. For those of you that are listening, want to encourage you can find out all the information about the Life Vision Challenge at our website, livingrichley.me. All kinds of other information there, including the link to our Facebook group, the Living Richly Nation. So check out the website and check out the challenge. Until next time, we want to encourage you to get out there and continue to live your very best life.